welcome to In Your Neighborhood, a program that looks at various neighborhoods throughout the city and helps you to stay informed and know what's going on in your backyard, so to speak. Joining me to talk all about Ward 2 is the Ward 2 Quincy City Councilor. That would be Anthony Andronico. Anthony, welcome back to QATV.
Mark, thanks for having me again. I appreciate it. Looking forward to chatting about the neighborhoods from Quincy Point to Penns Hill and everywhere in between in Ward 2.
Very good. Well, I'm interested, not only because I'm interested in the city of Quincy, but I grew up in Ward 2. So this is certainly something that if my mom doesn't see it on TV, which she probably will, I can take some of the information back to her. A lot of what we're going to be talking about today is actually published in your Ward 2 newsletter.
That's right. Yeah, we tried something a little bit different. Email newsletters, sometimes they bounce back, they go to your junk folder, you can't really find them. So I figured this new physical newsletter, just trying to run it quarterly, a couple times a year to let people know what's actually happening in their neighborhood and let them know that if there's something going wrong or they have a concern, they can always just reach out, say hello, and we can get that addressed.
Let's talk about some neighborhood meetings that you held in your ward recently. And your ward is really, as you had mentioned at the beginning of the program, broken up into different communities.
That's right. And just because of that, I wanted to personalize those town hall meetings a little bit more. So within the newsletter, depending on where you lived, there were different nights for your particular town hall, and we had them down at City Hall. I thought that was fitting. If you can have a town hall, have it at City Hall.
Right.
But it was some great turnout between the 4 different nights within each of the neighborhoods that I sort of split them up into. But people expressed a lot of positive things, mainly about their neighbors, the community with which they live, the pride that they take in living within Quincy and in Ward 2. And of course, there's always some concerns that are raised. People are concerned about their property taxes. They're concerned about the condition of their roadways. They're concerned about at the time, ongoing negotiations between school employees and things like that, and their kids' education. But a lot of great things came to the forefront, and one thing in particular that we had actually talked about was roadway infrastructure and the capital plan from a few years ago in 2021, where we ended up submitting over $100 million in roadway infrastructure, $50 million for water and sewer, and just some of the things of what's the schedule like, what are people going to see moving forward.
As you mentioned, infrastructure. Just coming off of a meeting at the last council meeting, as a matter of fact, and the Commissioner of Public Works, Al Grazioso, had some news to share.
That's right. We're looking at a potential additional $10 million in investment. Part of that would be a low-interest loan from the state. So basically, the way it works is we take the $10 million as a form of a loan, and Quincy would qualify for a 1.5% interest rate on that loan. And in addition, because of some of the target numbers in terms of demographics that Quincy hits, we're also qualified for, I believe it's a $660,000 deduction in the principal on that loan. But as part of that meeting, there were a lot of roads highlighted. I think most notably within Ward 2 was a large section within Quincy Ave. As driving up all the time, that there's a large section of that roadway that just needs to be repaired, and it's important that we get that funding through to actually get that work done.
Is that around O'Lindy's, the bowling center?
Yes, right around there. So effectively from where the Cam Man is, all the way back going towards the center to where Water Street is. So roughly around that area is where we're looking to redo. But there's a lot of neighborhood streets as well that need to be addressed.
If folks want to know where they are on the list, or if they want to make sure that they get put on the list, what could they do?
Well, you can always contact me at 617-376-1352 or at my email address aandronico@quincyma.gov. But people need to know as well they can contact the DPW. They can contact the mayor's office as well. Now, it's not like it used to be decades and decades ago where I could just make a phone call and whatever street goes right to the top of the list. But it is important for, I think, the administration and DPW to know where the problem areas are within the city so that they can score the streets, so to speak, where it's where the city effectively evaluates the streetscape and sees, well, what's the condition of the water and sewer underneath? What's the schedule for when that needs to be replaced? What's the condition of the roadway? How many people are impacted by the work being done? What's the scope of the neighborhood as a whole? What needs to change as far as infrastructure over there? And DPW does their best to group these different neighborhoods so that we're not unnecessarily digging up a street when additional work needs to be done. So for example, if your water and sewer pipes are in tough shape and they have maybe another 3 or 4 years, we're not going to repave that street until we address the water and sewer, because we don't want to repave it and then 2 years later have to dig up your street, pave it again. That's wasteful to the taxpayers of the city of Quincy, and more importantly, as a resident, it's not a fun time going through construction season, so we always try to get that work wrapped up quickly for them.
Before we leave the town meeting subject, any overall, I guess, concerns of residents that seem to be present from neighborhood to neighborhood?
I think it varies depending on where you live within the city. You know, when we were doing the Penns Hill meeting, people were talking a lot about Faxon Park and how are we going to make improvements up there and bring it back to the glory days from a few decades ago. And I think there has been some new life that's within the park. And then, you know, when we're closer to Quincy Point, we're talking more about, you know, a little more development. What's going to happen on Washington Street? Are we going to see more development and mixed use? What's going on with the Fore River Clubhouse? Because the city's been doing a lot of work there in the last few years. So depending on where you were, you know, there were different issues that had come up.
And taking your lead, let's start with Faxon Park. That was a place I used to play baseball as a kid.
Yep.
A beautiful lot, beautiful space.
Absolutely. There's more than 50 acres of natural space, and that's really hard to come by in the city of Quincy. So I think it's pretty important that we preserve that space, nurture it, and make sure that it gets back to what it can be for the next generation. As part of that work, I know the Parks Department and the Department of Natural Resources, Dave Murphy and his team, have been doing a lot of work up there to make it all it can be. A couple of the things that have happened more recently is the implementation of a new disc golf course, Frisbee golf.
Which is hot now.
It is, yeah. My friends play it. I haven't found the time to actually get out and use it, but for those that at home that don't know, disc golf is effectively just golf, except you use a Frisbee instead, and instead of the small hole on the ground, there's sort of a metal cage around that you have to, chain link cage that you got to throw the Frisbee into. And it's a 9-hole disc golf course, and that came about because some of the trees that were up there, we had a lot of tall, older oak trees, and they were causing some issues in terms of natural health of the park. A few of them had died, and we just needed to clear a bunch of those, and we're still in the process of replanting different species of trees, so to foster a better environment. But it also came up that we had a large space, and instead of putting another ball field or things like that, that this was an opportunity to put something new and a little bit different in the park. And so the Frisbee golf had come up. And then we're also looking forward, I believe this summer, and talking with Mr. Murphy, is that we'll replace the pavilion right at the top as well. That's certainly seen better days. So there are a few improvements coming, and I know folks should go out, check it out, look at one of the, I think the red and blue trails that are up there.
I've done both.
Yeah, they're nice. I think the beginning of one is right after the start of the playground, and that's right where the first hole for the Frisbee golf is, if people want to check that out. It's just a beginner course, so anyone that's never really played before, feel free to go and check it out and see everything that Faxon Park has to offer.
And I know a while back, probably, I would say not too long ago, but maybe it's longer than I thought, the slides, the swings, that was all redone.
That was redone a few years ago. Yeah, that was just before my time. I can't take credit for that one, so I'd like to shout out former Councilor Kroll for that work. But it also reminded me, we also have the outdoor ping pong tables that are up there now. You can do it. There's a 2-player table, your traditional, and then there's a round table for 4 players as well. And I'd like to give some thanks to the Penns Hill Neighborhood Association too for stocking that actually with some paddles and some balls just for the neighborhood. But yeah, a lot of great things up there.
I know Representative Taki Chan mentioned that in the House budget there's money set aside for the Friends of Faxon Park.
That's right, and the Friends have been so instrumental in breathing new life into the area and kind of taking the lead on making some of these smaller changes and advising, because the Friends are the people that live around the park, go there each and every day, and they see those small, subtle changes, and they know what can make it an even better place. And that's what I always love about Quincy in particular, is there's always a group of folks to step up and try to make our communities better.
Well, that's pride in the community in which you live in, which is great. Let's move to Quincy Point, and you referenced development there. You mentioned Washington Street. Let's
Sure.
look at the Neon Marketplace.
Yes, so the Neon Marketplace finally opened a few months ago, and way back when it was going through like the licensing process and that, Inspectional Services had actually made the decision regarding the zoning situation that the former pre-existing non-conforming use of that particular site was not the new proposal wasn't so much different than the pre-existing use, and therefore it was okay. So it didn't actually have to have a full zoning board hearing. I did have a couple people reach out about that, but that was the decision that was made by the Director of Inspectional Services at that time. So to this point, Neon Marketplace is open. It's a new, what I'd call upscale convenience store and gas station where there's ready-made sandwiches and pizza. You can get alcoholic beverages there as well. I believe at this point in time they're open to until either 10 or 11. They're actually coming up before, I believe, the zoning board to see if they can get 24-hour licensing in the next couple weeks within May, so we'll see how that meeting goes. But it's a nice new space instead of an old, dilapidated lot, and I think that that's going to mean well for Quincy Point.
Oh, it means a lot to drive by that area now and to see the brightness and the cleanness of that site,
No,
definitely.
absolutely. And there's another project that's going before the zoning board down the street for a potential mixed-use development. You've seen them, popping up everywhere, but a 3-story proposal, first floor commercial, second and third stories being residential. And that'll go before the zoning board, but there's some new life that's starting to happen on Washington Street. That's all the way down at the Rotary with Quincy Cannabis.
Right,
To
I
the
was gonna
other
mention
end
that as well.
on where it meets Southern Artery and Neon Marketplace. And we can't forget, of course, about the stalwart that is Frozen Freddy's, just a block away as well.
Let's talk about traffic and maybe some improvements that have been made throughout your ward, some maybe new programs.
Sure. Well, traffic is one of the things that people talk about all the time.
Of course.
There's more and more people each and every day. Quincy's a great place to live. It's a great place to work and to raise a family. So understandably, there's going to be traffic. No way about it. And one of the improvements in talking with Ed Grennan is we've been trying to get funding over the last few years for special cameras that you can put, you can retrofit to existing street lights that will time out light cycles in real time. So one of them in particular is over by the McKays and Sweeney's Funeral Home, the Adams houses. There's a 5-way intersection over there where Franklin meets Independence Ave. And at that 5-way intersection, we have those new cameras now that see the cars in real time and can adjust light cycles on the fly. And so that's been a major improvement, not just over there, but in a few other sections of the city. We were just talking about it, but I believe it's Washington and Southern Artery at that intersection also has the cameras over there so that we can time out. That gets especially busy during rush hour. But just trying to smooth out some traffic a little bit and make those light cycles easier so that there's not unnecessary waiting between your light cycle. But in addition to things like that, we have speed cameras that have gone up throughout the city itself. Off the top of my head, we have one on Southern Artery leading up to Falls Boulevard and by 1000 Southern Artery. We have them on Sumner Street. We have them on Kendrick Ave. There's one on South Street. So all over the place, these speed cameras have helped remind folks that, hey, you might be going a little fast. Maybe it's time to just pump the brakes a bit because there is a 25-mile-an-hour citywide speed limit unless otherwise posted. So we do our best to just remind folks that that's happening. And then another part in terms of traffic improvements has actually been on the pedestrian side and rapid flashing beacons. So around the city is just trying to station those, get those up and running so that when you push the button, the pedestrian sign lights up, alerts vehicles, they know to slow down, and we're putting them in some more prominent areas. And actually, we're putting one over by the Presidential Estates and by 1000 Southern Artery over there. And we're still trying to get the funding for that, but we're hopeful that this summer that will actually be able to go in. Ed Grennan has been working on that, and Officer Cleary, the Ward 2 Community Police Officer, for what feels like about a year at this point. I know government sometimes works a little slower than folks would like, but we do have to check off a few boxes and make sure we get the funding to be able to do some work like that.
You had mentioned the Four River Clubhouse, so let's turn our attention there because there has been work done there, but continuing work.
Yes,
Correct?
that one has been one step forward, two steps back. It feels like for the last couple of years, and I do have to give a shout out to Commissioner Hines in charge of public buildings, him and his team who have been taking that on for the last few years. Every single time that it feels like we're making progress on it, we find something that goes wrong. It feels like we're renovating an older house, because that's basically what we're doing. The building's over 100 years old, so a few of the things that they have found and had to deal with. So once they pulled back a couple of the walls, they found termite damage all throughout. So major beams needed to be replaced. We had to order those. That added more time to it. We went up to the second floor, and there were live electrical wires hanging down openly that needed to be addressed. Yep. And so we needed to replace the electrical system. The underside of the roof needed to be re-insulated. There were a few holes in the roof, even though it was replaced not too long ago, that had to be addressed. There was a leak within the chimney on the roof itself, and there were so many throughout that we ended up needing to remove the chimney from the boiler room in the basement through the first story and the second story up to the roof as well. So that took a while too. And that's just the stuff that we need to repair for a safety issue, let alone the things that we're trying to get done to make it an even better space. But on that front, and actually improving the space outside of just the safety upgrades, we're looking at a new kitchenette space to be open in the next few months. That's still underway. But for those that have been in the clubhouse, when you first enter, the room to your right, the fireplace room, which won't have a chimney, is now open completely for public use. Folks can call the rec department to schedule that and use it just for community use. I saw a couple weeks ago, there was a kid's birthday party over there, and it's nice with the playground there and the big field. So that's a nice spot. In a couple weeks, we have the multicultural fair, the QPS multicultural fair, at the Four River Clubhouse, mainly on the field, but the teams will be able to work out of that big room as sort of a staging area as well. So the Four River Clubhouse is on its way, I'd say. The big room will be open, we're hoping, late summer, early fall. But Director Hines is always a little skittish at giving a full timeline on that. And I understand why. Because the building had been closed for a long time due to construction delays and ordering new parts. But we're partially open right now, and there's a good space in there, and looking forward to see it completely renovated.
And as far as the area surrounding, outside of the clubhouse, I know there's a pickleball court there.
Mm-hmm. Yep, we have the pickleball court, we have the basketball courts over there, the new playground that opened 3-4 years ago at this point in time, just before the pandemic, and then, of course, the baseball fields are still over there.
The Multicultural Festival is happening on May 13th from 12 to 4 p.m. We are recording this program on Cinco de Mayo.
That's right. So we're just over a week away, but we're looking forward to it.
And I did that without my glasses. So nice font size on this. You and I talked about, I guess, tying in the pride that comes from folks living in the city. Mm-hmm. Part of that actually is participating in Cleaner Greener Quincy.
That's right.
We're recording this on the 5th. Cleaner Greener will happen on the 6th, so that would be tomorrow.
That's right, and there's so many folks that have stepped up to sign up to clean up the public space. So all the way from, Point Webster Middle School, Clifford Marshall School. I know there are actually some students that live in Ward 2 that go to Lincoln Hancock too, so those kids have signed up to do work over there. Of course, the Friends of Faxon Park are dealing with Faxon Park. I believe Ward 2 Civic is over at Mound Street and Avalon Beach. And just all these places in between that people care about. And that's what I love about Cleaner Greener in particular, is that it's an opportunity for the whole community to get together to show their pride in those public spaces. And I know not everyone can get out and join us, but I do hope maybe that they take care of their own lawns and own gardens too and join in the sort of spring cleaning that we have. And then, of course, I know there's a community cookout afterwards starting at noon up at Pageant Field. So anyone that's participating in Cleaner Greener should be able to go there and get a burger or a hot dog and say hello to your fellow neighbors.
You want your property to certainly fit in and not stand out You want it to fit in with a clean neighborhood that you reside in.
That's right. And one of the great things I think that the city does too is the Neat Neighbor Contest. Is that on a rolling basis throughout the years, if you have a neighbor who goes what you might say is above and beyond, you could submit your neighbor's address to be considered for an award through the city, just to say thank you. And I think that's a really nice thing to do, for your neighbor and for your community, and even just recognizing people's hard work because they put a lot of money into, taking care of their space.
Absolutely. Let's talk about needles and disposal of needles. If someone comes across a needle
Sure.
in their neighborhood, in their area.
Yeah, this comes up usually around springtime and with Cleaner Greener. And sometimes when you're out there cleaning up these public spaces, you may find some used needles. And the city does have an arrangement with Manic Community Health Center, where if you come across those, you can call the city, you can call myself, you can call Manic Community Health to let them know of the particular location, and they will go out and address that right away. There was actually a situation a week and a half or so ago. There's a path leading up from Quincy Ave to Falls Boulevard and Faxon Park, sort of on the back half there, and a constituent had come across a bunch of needles. It was a difficult situation. They didn't want anyone to get hurt. So they gave me a call, and then I talked with Dave Murphy at the Parks, and then Dave Murphy reached out to, I believe it was Jamie at Manic Community Health, and they were out there the same day to make sure that that was addressed. And that's something that I really care about, and I really appreciate that they addressed that.
And of course, for the safety of all, please don't hesitate to contact folks regarding needles if you do come across them.
Absolutely, you should do it right away, and that's for your own safety, that's for your neighbor's safety. Folks that have dogs, sometimes you just can't see.
Which you do now.
I do now, yes. My wife made sure that we got a dog, so now we have one. His name is Brody. Brody is a rescue pup that we got out of New Jersey through Waldo's Rescue Pen. Brody was originally found on the side of the road in Georgia with his litter, but now he has a very loving home, and we're so happy to have him. He loves going to Faxon Park himself, so we want to make sure those trails are safe for him and so many of his other neighbor dogs too.
Absolutely. Let's talk about the municipal broadband, and it's actually a proposal that a colleague of yours had presented.
That's right. Ward 3 Councilor Ian Kane had presented that before my time on the council, 5-6 years ago at this point, to start a municipal broadband platform within the city of Quincy. But effectively, right now, your only option for internet is Comcast, and that's it. If you look at the map where you see where Verizon is offered for internet service, they're everywhere right around us except for us. So in terms of bringing more competition to Quincy, he said, well, what if we stepped up and we offered that infrastructure and maintained it, and then the city could offer broadband itself to anyone that wanted to participate. So we took another step somewhat recently to create an enterprise fund. So the same way that water is set up within the city of Quincy, where as a ratepayer, you pay into that fund, and then revenue from that fund is used to address issues with your water infrastructure. Sort of like that. So we did that for broadband service, and we're looking at this upcoming fall having a proposal together to actually fund a couple pilot programs to see how this broadband infrastructure would work. And I'm really proud to say that one of the 2 neighborhoods in all of Quincy to be selected was Quincy Point. And so won't be all of Quincy Point, but a certain section, my understanding is around Washington Street, will get the first crack at it, along with a section of Marymount. But there's a lot of cultural, economic diversity within Ward 2, and especially within Quincy Point. And so we want to make sure that those voices are heard in particular, and that we get good feedback. And so hopefully this will provide an option for better internet service at a lower price. And that's the goal overall here.
I know before the city council, this is actually citywide, looking at a review of the zoning code.
That's right. So we had talked about that. I actually signed on to Councilor Liang's resolve asking for a citywide zoning code review. And I'd done that for a couple of reasons. The resolution talks about a few different things. One, it talks about the potential for a residential property tax exemption, which is something that I've been hopeful for the last couple of years. But at what point is it economically feasible for the city to actually implement that? What's the ratio need to be of commercial to industrial to residential to be able to afford to do something like that and make that transition, where if you're in an owner-occupied home within the city of Quincy, then you get a certain reduction on your property taxes because of that, because you didn't rent it out, so to speak. That's what the property tax exemption is. So at what point can that happen? At what point does the city say, do residents say, this is the type of zoning and development that I want to have in my neighborhood? Because, as you may know, these zoning board meetings can get really heated at certain points, and oftentimes people walk away from that process frustrated, saying, the board didn't listen to me, there wasn't enough parking with this, or the building height was too high. And in Ward 2 in particular, most of Ward 2 is zoned for residential B or for business. There are very, very few slots that are Res A, which is just single-family homes. So a lot of times, like I think of the neighborhood that my father grew up in on Edward Street in Quincy Point. That's a Res B neighborhood. And most of the homes there are either single-family homes or they're two-family homes that just have 2 stories, and that's it. And then a developer comes in and has a proposal for 4 units, 3 stories, and they can do it because that's what it's zoned for. So when we talk about the changing of the character of neighborhoods, that's something that I think people want to see addressed. People also, I think, want to see a difference in better defining what is the downtown. And slowly and slowly the downtown is building out, and they want to see that confined to a very specific area. Because it's great to have a thriving downtown, but when it starts encroaching upon people's neighborhoods, and especially ones that it's only 2-story homes, people are going to start to talk and say, well, what is this development doing for me? So I think it's time at this point that we have a zoning code review and at least foster some more conversations to get a better understanding of what do residents want to see in their city, because that's who the zoning code should be for, the folks that currently live here and looking forward to addressing challenges moving forward too in terms of housing.
You and I were speaking before we actually started recording about the gate being open at Independence
That's
Ave,
right.
and access to the MBTA.
Right.
It's going along fine.
So far, so good. Yeah, so for the folks that don't know, to access the Quincy Adams T-stop, right where Independence Ave meets Verchild Street, there's a gate there that you can walk up. You're on the 5th floor, and then you have to take the elevator or the stairs all the way down to get to the regular platform to take the T. But a few years ago, when that had opened for the first time in decades, there was a lot of concern about what's traffic going to be like. Are people going to park in front of my house all the time? How's the permit sticker going to work? What if I have a friend over and they get a ticket and they weren't going to the T, they were just coming by to say hello? But a lot of those issues actually haven't persisted, like we see closer to Quincy Center, Wollaston, North Quincy. And I think a large part of that is because people don't know that there's this back entrance. And so if you hear that tip, keep it to just your Quincy friends, because we don't want to cause any traffic issues for the folks up on Penns Hill in that neighborhood too.
Which is now your neighborhood as well.
It is. My wife and I, we got married this past June, and we actually said, all right, let's just take the year and not try to add any more stress. So we decided instead ultimately to buy a house. We bought in Penns Hill, and then we got a dog. And now we're doing a bunch of work on the house, and we're training our dog Brody. But it can certainly be a lot. But
And the next time you're in, there'll be a whole bunch more.
Probably, right?
Right. Always is. Always is. I want to thank you for joining me and certainly getting this, I suppose, video version of your newsletter out to folks.
Absolutely. People get their media and their information from all variety of different sources, and I appreciate you having me on to talk about the latest in Ward 2.
Absolutely. We'll have you back.
Sounds good. Thank you.
And thank you at home for watching, and please remember to always tune in to QATV either on channels 8, 9, or 1072, that's the HD channel, and online again, as I'd mentioned, QATV.org. Take care.